Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Adriana woke up to the alarm clock ringing, jumped up in bed. She had to get up quickly, get her daughter up, put the kettle on, see Christopher off to work. Husband also woke up, half lying in bed, leaning on his elbows and sleepily flapping his eyes. Probably again last night, he went to bed late, played another game. Hurry up, I'll put the kettle on and wake Lisa up. Please clear the bathroom by then. Adriana, you again? Christopher looked at her with anxiety and irritation. What? The woman didn't understand. It's Saturday. You forgot to turn off the alarm clock again. The man turned on his side and closed his eyes. It's Saturday. That's right. Adriana suddenly remembered vividly how yesterday she had turned off the alarm clock before going to bed, but today it had rung insistently, waking her up at exactly 7 o'clock. What's going on with her? Adriana threw on a robe and walked out of the bedroom, shutting the door behind her. She wouldn't be able to sleep anyway, lying there thinking about what was happening to her. It would be better to watch a movie while everyone was asleep. It would take her mind off her worries. Something strange had been happening to her lately. It's hard to say when the first warning signs appeared, probably 6 months ago or a little earlier. The memory of a young woman who had recently turned only 30 years old suddenly failed. Adriana, now she was forgetting and confusing everything. Maybe it's the maternity leave. They say young moms who haven't worked for a long time start to degenerate. They fixate on the baby and don't notice anything else. Hence the problems. How could it be? The scene of her husband leaving for work in the morning was clearly in front of her eyes. Christopher asked for chicken. At first, such situations were rare. The woman didn't even pay attention to them. Let's think about it. Running in tired, but now it happened several times a day. Adriana did not find things that she thought she had left in certain places, and also lost documents, got confused about events, forgot to do some important things. One time she almost started a fire in the apartment in the first place. She and Christopher and Lisa were going for a walk in the park. Adriana was stewing vegetables and meat for dinner, and she turned off the stove before leaving. The woman remembered the exact moment. She walked over to the cauldron, opened the lid, breathed in the pleasant aroma of the finished dish, and turned the knob on the stove. She also checked that all the switches were facing up. The family went outside. Lisa, riding on her daddy's shoulders, was happy that they were all together. Adriana was in an elevated mood as well. Good thing Christopher had forgotten his cell phone at home and discovered it halfway to the park. The man came back, and there was a fire almost started in the apartment. Turns out Adriana hadn't turned off the stove after all. The water had boiled off, the vegetables and meat were charred, and the cauldron itself was beginning to smoke. Acrid smoke was spreading through the apartment, a pungent odor, and it took a long time to get out of the rooms. Adriana was even afraid to admit to herself that something was wrong with her. No one but Christopher knew about her memory problems. Her husband seemed to be supportive, reassuring, but the woman saw that he was already very annoyed. He urged the wife to see a doctor. Go see a doctor, asked Christopher. Maybe after childbirth, the body has malfunctioned. They'll prescribe some medicine, and that's it. But Adriana was in no hurry to go to the hospital. First, it would mean admitting that she had a problem with her head, and the woman was afraid of that. Secondly, Adriana worked in the police, for the time being as a simple secretary, but after her maternity leave, she was going to get a certified position, where her salary was much higher and she had many benefits. And if the doctor put her on the register, this plan would never come true. all the more so because the strange things happened only in some everyday moments. Adriana's mind was still clear. She'd checked on purpose. The woman perfectly coped with simulators on the internet, solved complex Sudoku, read to her daughter by heart long poems by Tchaikovsky. Recently, however, just the other day, a new frightening symptom was added. If it continues, then all will have to surrender to a specialist because, perhaps, she has a serious disease that makes a person dangerous to themselves and others. Especially Adriana was afraid for her daughter. Little if anything, she is with the baby almost all the time. Christopher often stays late at work, goes on business trips. He is building a career and gives now to this business all his time and energy. The first time it happened was in the evening. Christopher was on the floor with Lisa. They were building a tower of cubes. Adriana was washing the dishes after dinner. An idyllic picture. The whole family together. How rare that is lately. Her husband usually comes home from work when Lisa is asleep, but this time it was early. Through the noise of the water and the chatter of her husband and daughter, Adriana heard a woman's laughter, turned to Christopher, who was throwing Lisa to the ceiling and catching her. "Did you hear that?" Adriana asked. "What?" Christopher was surprised. It was immediately clear that he had not heard any laughter. Like a woman laughing. "That's Lisa laughing," shrugged his husband. "What woman?" Adriana shrugged. She had heard a woman's laughter, which could not be confused with the laughter of a little girl. A little later, when her daughter was asleep, the laughter came again. This time it was much longer and louder. She and Christopher were watching the evening news in the living room. Adriana glanced at her husband. He was watching the events on the screen as if nothing had happened. Apparently, the laughter could be heard again, only she alone. Adriana did not tell Christopher about what had happened, or he would definitely drag her to the doctor. For the same reason, Adriana had not yet disturbed her twin sister Wendy. For as long as the woman could remember, she had always trusted her with all her secrets. Wendy was the closest person to her who would always understand, always support, always help. But Adriana did not tell her twin about the strange symptoms. Why bother her? She was expecting a child now, and she didn't need any unnecessary excitement. Wendy, like Christopher, would insist on seeing a doctor. A doctor. Perhaps it was high time to run to him, but Adriana kept postponing this moment. She hoped that her health would return to normal. It's a good thing she has Christopher. His parents are so wonderful, they've taken her in like their own daughter. If anything were to happen to her, Lisa would not be left without support. She has a wonderful father, loving grandparents, Aunt Wendy. Lots of family people who, if anything, will raise the wee one. Though she didn't want to think about that scenario, of course. Adriana poured herself a cup of coffee, made some toast, and sat down in front of the TV in the living room. A very romantic scene was unfolding on the screen, the acquaintance of the main characters of the movie. Adriana remembered her own acquaintance with her future husband. The police where the woman worked was located in a large building. There were many other offices, both private and public. A spacious porch with a railing and a staircase overlooked the backyard. It was here that the employees of the institutions and firms in the building set up a sort of smoking area. The stairs were constantly crowded with people who had wandered out of their offices for a breath of fresh air, a little distraction, and conversation, most of them smoking. Adriana had no such bad habit. She went out for company with her colleagues, just to unwind, to stretch. At the time she met Christopher, Adriana was still new to the police force. Before that, she worked as a lawyer in a private furniture company, but she had to leave. It was a workplace romance. On the young, pretty Adriana, laid eyes on the CEO himself, an adult, wealthy, successful, self-confident. He wooed so beautifully, elegantly, unobtrusively, and at the same time persistently. Of course, the girl could not resist, although she knew that the chief was married. The relationship lasted for 2 years. Adriana was burdened by the role of mistress. She tried not to think about the wife of her man, because then she began to torment her conscience. Everything ended very ugly. Colleagues began to notice the relationship between the boss and the young lawyer. Rumors spread and Adriana was fired. Just like that, a man who sang beautifully about love cut the girl out of his life. It took Adriana a long time to recover from what had happened. She felt as if she had been used and then thrown out for lack of use. In fact, that's what it was really like. Humiliation, pain, a sense of worthlessness. It was Wendy who pulled her out of that state, which lasted about a year. She constantly braced her sister, turned on her life-affirming videos, dragged her shopping, convinced her that Adriana was beautiful and smart. She even brought in a psychologist under the guise of her friend. Otherwise, Adriana wouldn't have agreed to the meeting. For a whole year, Adriana didn't work, didn't study, didn't do anything. She had a strong feeling that she was slowly sinking to the bottom. And Wendy made her sister push herself off that bottom with both feet, gave her the impetus to move on with her life. Convinced that Adriana had a bright future ahead of her, and all that had happened was just a painful experience that made her stronger and wiser. Adriana took herself in hand, tidied up her appearance and head, updated her closet, and got a job as a secretary in the police, in the future to be certified and receive a rank. Here she met her future husband. Handsome colleagues, of course, showed attention employees, but the girl, learned by bitter experience, now avoided office romances and did not even consider these options. Christopher worked in a construction company located in the same building. The design of the office and the appearance of its employees said that the firm was succeeding. It was. Adriana often met Christopher in the smoking room. They did not communicate, not even say hello, but the girl caught his interested look, and she liked it very much. Sometimes the young people met eyes and smiled slightly at each other. Christopher was usually not alone, but that day, when the guy still dared to talk to Adriana, his colleagues and friends were not around. Despite her memory problems, Adriana remembered their first conversation very well. Wonderful weather, isn't it? Christopher smiled, coming closer. Adriana was glad that her co-workers had already finished and left. She was alone on the porch precisely because she wanted to enjoy the May Day a little more. Yes, Adriana agreed. The weather is really great, but it's supposed to get colder tomorrow. The weather had been talked about. The social decorum had been observed. Christopher summarized. Now for the really important stuff. Can I speak to you? Yes, of course. Adriana looked at her interlocutor with interest. I like you very much. I've been watching you for a long time, and I'm attracted to you like a magnet. Adriana didn't know what to say. The cute guy's revelation surprised her, but also pleased her. She felt a pleasant warmth in her chest. I suggest that we exchange phone numbers and meet outside these walls. That same evening, Christopher took Adriana on a date to a restaurant, and then they walked around the city at night, talking, laughing, even singing songs. Christopher was interesting, fun, and relaxed. Adriana felt that she was making the guy happy just by her mere presence. A wonderful feeling. The relationship developed rapidly. After a few months, Christopher proposed to move in together. He had a spacious apartment, stylish, cozy, modern. Adriana grew up in a poor family and was not used to such an interior. Christopher, on the other hand, didn't know any different. His father was a well-known businessman in the city. He gave his son one of his promising companies. At the age of 27, Christopher was already the head of a successful construction company. With his father's help, of course, but still. It was his parents who gave Christopher the apartment. But I already bought the car myself. With pride, said Christopher, playing with the key fob from his favorite SUV. Always dreamed of such a car. Not a car, but a beast. A year into their relationship, Christopher proposed to Adriana. Everything had been going on for a long time, so the girl was not even surprised. The only thing she was very worried about was the upcoming acquaintance with Christopher's parents. They are very wealthy people. How will the future parents-in-law treat a daughter-in-law from a poor family? All worries were in vain. Christina and Benjamin accepted Adriana as their own. Christopher's mother complimented the girl, and his father constantly put the most delicious salads and appetizers on the guests' plate. We are so happy that Christopher finally decided to settle down. Christina confessed, "We wish you happiness. You will have a strong, harmonious family. And if there are any difficulties, we are always there for you. You can count on us." Adriana also liked Christopher's parents very much. They did not correspond to her stereotypes about rich people, behaved very simply, naturally, and sincerely. After the wedding, the newlyweds started to plan a child right away. Adriana wanted to become a mother, and her parents-in-law dreamed of grandchildren. Adriana had no doubt that her son or daughter would have loving and caring grandparents. But time passed, and the cherished pregnancy never came. Christopher seemed to support his wife, but it seemed to Adriana that he himself was not so much dreaming of a baby. "So what? Well, later we'll give birth," carelessly said Christopher. "We are still so young. There is plenty of time." Adriana could not wait calmly for a miracle. She went to doctors, underwent examinations. No abnormalities were found. They advised her to check her husband. But Christopher refused to go to the hospital. "There's nothing wrong with me. Don't make it up." Adriana once shared her misfortune with her mother-in-law. "Is that what it is? And we thought you didn't want children yet." She said, "It's good that you came to me. I know specialists will help." There was so much confidence in Christina's words that Adriana was encouraged. Examinations in private medical centers were strikingly different from visiting the city women's clinic. Modern equipment, polite, attentive staff, stylish, pleasant interiors, and no queues. The doors to Christina opened as if by themselves. She only had to approach the office, and everywhere they were treated as important persons. The problem turned out to be hormones. Adriana took the prescribed medication, and the next month she tearfully admired the 2 stripes on the test. "You see, I told you, everything will be fine," smiled Christopher. "I'm going to be a daddy now. How cool it is." Adriana expected a more emotional reaction from her husband. After all, they were almost 2 years to this happiness. But Christopher had become indifferent lately. He was always absent at work, more often on business trips. All his thoughts were about the firm, Adriana's personal affairs. He was no longer interested, and compliments her, as before, did not shower, but respected, supported in everything helped. Perhaps this is the ideal marriage. Romantic period. Well, it is, of course, a golden time, but it cannot last forever. Now their relationship is moving to a whole new level. They're about to become parents. Unbelievable. Christina and Benjamin. The news of the upcoming addition to the family was ecstatic. The mother-in-law even wept, and the father-in-law gave his daughter-in-law a car. And me? jokingly offended Christopher. I was involved too. Then Lisa was born. Christopher was not a very caring father. Her temples rattled. The familiar world was crumbling. Now everything would change, and I didn't want that to happen. Adriana liked her family so much, the world they had both built, but it all seemed to be just an illusion of happiness. Darling, you know we have to be patient. If the girl stays with Adriana, her parents will give them the inheritance, and I'll be left with nothing. It just takes a little time, that's all. You said so yourself, and you were right. What? It's not making any sense. All right, the mistress, the relationship on the side, it's probably a boomerang. I had an affair with the chief when I was younger. I was a mistress. But what does this have to do with Lisa? Why does Christopher call his daughter such a rude name? Girl. And most importantly, what does his parents' inheritance have to do with it? Honey, the plan's working, isn't it? You're so smart. You thought of everything so well. Adriana can't believe herself. I'm going to get her to see a doctor. The official records will be our biggest advantage. We have to be patient a little longer, or we'll ruin everything. It would be a shame, because we're almost there. And Adriana didn't understand. Mistress, plan, almost there. What's going on? A relationship on the side, at least that's understandable. Painful, hurtful, but in principle, the situation is almost standard in the modern world. And she's the first, not the last wife to be so brazenly lied to by her husband. But according to Christopher, it's not just about the relationship on the side. Yeah, it's hard, but Adriana's pretty sure she's lost her mind. We have to think of something else. The laugh tape idea is awesome. I wish you could have seen her face. I had a lot of trouble holding back and pretending there was no laughter. I turned the tape on twice that day, then took a break. I'll try again tomorrow. Then the conversation turned to another topic. Christopher began discussing an upcoming trip with his mistress to the sea, which he was going to present to the family as a business trip. Adriana slipped quietly into the bedroom, opened herself with a blanket, and turned her back to the wall. She had heard enough already. There was no way Christopher would notice her and realize she was aware of it. It turns out Christopher is purposely making her believe that there is something wrong with her head. He needs to make her seem crazy for some reason. Why? He said that the laughter Adriana heard recently was just an audio recording. The husband would turn it on and pretend he didn't hear anything. How did these sounds, which supposedly existed only in her head, frighten Adriana? And everything else? The woman suddenly realized that all the strange things were happening to her when Christopher was around. How had she not noticed it before? To her surprise, Adriana felt relief and even something like joy. Yes, her spouse was clearly up to no good, and she was being tricked. But she's healthy. She's fine. A chill suddenly ran through Adriana's body, even though she was covered with a warm blanket. What if all this overheard conversation was just a figment of her imagination, a sick imagination? How hard it was to figure out, I guess it was impossible to hide what was going on from everyone. I must call Wendy tomorrow. She had always had a sharp mind, and her sister would be sure to help her figure it all out. A couple of minutes later, Christopher returned to the bedroom, carefully lowered himself onto the bed, covered himself with a blanket. Soon his peaceful breathing sounded. His husband quickly fell asleep. But Adriana did not sleep a wink until morning. Heavy thoughts were studying in her head. There were more questions than answers. Christopher woke up from the insistent ringing of the alarm clock. His wife was not in bed. She was busy in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. The man stretched and got up. Soon his life will change for the better will be carefree and fun, carefree, almost like before in his teenage years. Soon there wouldn't be that boring Adriana around, and there will be another woman living here, someone who's always fun, a celebration person. Emily. Christopher had known Emily for a long time, long before he met Adriana. The first time they saw each other was at a nightclub on the dance floor. Christopher immediately noticed the graceful girl, relaxed movements, confident look. She was dressed in a short leather skirt and a short top, a bold outfit. Of course, Emily's beauties were staring at most of the guys having fun in the club, but she chose him, Christopher, came up to him, looked into his eyes, and suddenly kissed him. An unconventional start. Christopher even felt dizzy. She was so bold, confident, uncompromising in everything. Always took what she wanted right away. Christopher fell madly in love with her. It had never happened to him before. He couldn't think of anyone but his new acquaintance. Fortunately, the interest and attraction was mutual. Nightclubs, apartment parties, bars, rock concerts. Emily loved the entertainment, just as Christopher did. They partied hard, traveled, raced bikes, swam at night in lakes and rivers, walked on rooftops. Drinks flowed. Cost entertainment, of course, not cheap, but the guy had no problems with money then, with such a mom and dad. Parents did not dote in their only son and tried to fulfill his every wish. So it happened from the moment Christopher went to the 3rd grade. Then the business of his father finally began to bring a small, decent income. Christopher's father used to work as a designer at a factory. Mom worked as a teacher in the economics department at the local university. They both made a pittance. Tired of the lack of money, Benjamin decided to start his own business. Of course, Christina helped her husband in everything. Especially she was well versed in accounting. The parents went into business with their heads. At home almost did not appear, since 10 years Christopher was left to himself. Grandparents who would look after a small grandchild in the family was not, so the boy began an independent life. At first, Christopher was bored in loneliness. He sometimes even became scared alone in an empty apartment. The boy played dinner by himself, sat over his lessons by himself, sometimes even went to bed by himself. Mom and Dad often came home very late. And then, after some time, Christopher realized all the advantages of his position and began to actively use them. He got a taste of freedom. Every step of his friends were controlled by adults, moms, dads, grandparents, and he could go wherever he wanted after school and do what he wanted. He also had money. Parents, feeling guilty before their son, tried to pay him off with gifts and financial injections. Of course, Christopher soon had a company of people who loved freedom as much as he did. The boy was not stingy. Treating new acquaintances, chips, and soda, took them to the movies and attractions. The boys, in return, showed little Christopher life. It turned out that sometimes you can skip school and the world won't turn upside down because of it. Instead of sitting at the desk and listening to the boring explanations of the teacher, Christopher walked around the city with his friends. They climbed abandoned buildings, walked at the train station, wandered through the secret corners of the old park. The kids smashed bottles against the fence, burned fires away from human eyes, played with the local dogs, teased the homeless. Oh, what fun it was! Christopher did not even want to remember about his gray, boring life before meeting his buddies. Of course, his parents noticed that their son was changing. His mother tried to take measures, enrolled him in circles and sections to occupy his free time, and once even hired him, already a teenager, a nanny. But Christopher methodically ignored visits to sports clubs and development centers, and he drove the nanny crazy on her first day of work, and the woman absolutely refused to work with him. "Nothing, we grew up the same way," waved his father, "and he'll be fine, he'll get over it. It's just a period of time, a transitional age. I wasn't a goody-goody either." Even at his young age, the boy realized that both parents thought it was advantageous to think so. They invested so much time and effort in the business that there was no energy left for solving problems with their son, who was fighting off his hands. That's fine. Christopher was quite satisfied with it, and the guy was again left alone for a while. However, they began to give much less money, only for transportation and school lunch. It happened after the father smelled cigarettes from his son. "If you start, it will be hard to quit," he warned me. "The consequences are terrible, especially for those who start at such an early age. Your body is still forming. I understand that you tried it once out of curiosity, but don't you dare try it again." Christopher nodded his head obediently. He could hardly contain his smile. Tried it once. His father hadn't guessed at all. The teenager had been smoking for a long time. He just did it in the morning so that his parents didn't smell too much and chewed mint gum. This time he ran out of gum, so he got caught, and he always knew where to get money. His parents kept cash in a box on the bookcase. His parents' business was booming. By the time Christopher graduated from high school, it was a mini empire. Branches all over the city, regular customers, a big name, an impeccable reputation. The business was up and running. Parents were finally able to breathe a little. They had free time. They looked at their grown-up son and were horrified. Christopher turned into a careless party boy, for whom the norm is to skip a week at school. The guy was kept, not expelled only thanks to the fact that his parents sponsored the institution. On the eve of entering the university, Christopher was not interested in anything but girls, clubs, discos. He socialized with the same as himself, pro-lifers. The guy enjoyed authority among his friends. Of course he did, because he usually sponsored the parties. Christina took her son seriously. It turned out that in school, the son all these years only listed. He'd been skipping school, wandering around. Naturally, he didn't do his homework. The gaps in his education were appalling, and Christopher sincerely did not understand why he should study. He saw that in the modern world, everything is decided by money. His parents had no shortage of finances. His father will buy him a university diploma and then put in one of their office's director, and Christopher will still think about whether to hire any of these nerdy, excellent students that he has always put as an example. But the mother did not agree with this approach. Parents put the guy, tough conditions, either he plays by their rules or remains without means of subsistence. And he's almost 18, a grown man. They've done their job, nurtured and raised him to adulthood, then the choice is his. Christopher did not take the words of his parents seriously and continued his usual life. He did not want to change anything, and is it possible now? His mother cried, begged him to stop, offered help. His father wrinkled his nose and kept silent, trying to have serious conversations with his son. How they pissed him off. And then there was the exam. Of course, Christopher passed it with the lowest scores, but the boy didn't worry about it. His father would think of something, after all, just pay tuition at some university. Christopher will be there for 5 years, because in the university is even easier, paid and walk for the next 6 months. And then he will get a diploma and become a department head in some daddy's firm or even the director of a branch. But to the boy's surprise, his father was in no hurry to get him into university. "You're already 18. You're an adult. You're on your own," said Benjamin. "By the way, we've split the utility bills, so you'll pay too. If you don't go to school, then go work. I don't have to support a big-age brat. At first, Christopher thought his parents didn't mean it, but they really stopped giving him money, and the life-saving jewelry box disappeared from its usual place. Without money, it's boring. Without money, there are fewer friends. Without money, you have to eat the crap your mother cooks, soups, stews, pasta. Christopher has long been hooked on fast food and takeaways. He desperately wanted to drink, but he needed money for that too. The guy even got a job. Where to go? Courier at a local cafe. There wasn't much more qualified for the job. Now he was carrying a heavy box on his shoulders, walking and cycling to different addresses. He was often looked at with disdain. He didn't feel very good about himself. The pay is paltry, the work is not easy. There is not enough money for entertainment anyway, and sometimes there is no strength left. Not life, but gray boredom and misery. His parents also demanded from him to invest in buying groceries and paying for the apartment. Although they did not need it, they just went on principle. Christopher hated his mother and father for their behavior. More than once he tried to suck up, to negotiate, but his parents remained adamant, and Christopher gave up. He agreed to their terms, and there were many demands. First, the refusal of nightclubs and dubious company, from the word at all. If parents smell Christopher's odor of booze, then immediately put him on the street and let him spin as he wants. Secondly, tutoring. It will be necessary to pass the exam again and try to enter the university and by himself. If he fails, he'll go to the army in the spring draft. This year, his father bothered to defer, but he will not do it again. Third, attending a day hospital clinic. Independently cope with addictions. As parents thought, Christopher will not succeed, so they found good specialists for him. But in order to start work, the written consent of the boy is needed. He is, after all, already an adult. Christopher agreed to all these conditions. What else could he do? The parents were overjoyed. They encouraged their son. His mother and father now spoke to him affectionately. They didn't give him money, but at least they didn't make him go to work and bought him delicious food, the kind of food he was used to. Christopher's days were filled to the brim. He studied a lot with tutors. At first, the idea for 6 months to catch up with the school program seemed crazy. But then the guy realized that the study is given to him relatively easy. Christopher even and a little liked it. And Christopher visited the clinic almost every day. IVs, soul-sleeping conversations, all this dragged and terribly annoying. Instead of the hospital, Christopher would have loved to go to the club with friends. Despite all the efforts of specialists, desperately craved a drink. Outwardly, Christopher became calmer and more compliant. He pretended to accept the rules of the game imposed by his parents, but himself only waited for the moment when they let their guard down to return to the usual way of life. At night, he dreamed of nightclubs and walks with friends. The guy realized all this will come back, you just have to be patient. Of course, the miracle did not happen. Christopher did not pass the exam for high scores, but the result was average, even a little higher, which in his situation looked like a real victory. His father gladly paid for the university tuition and even secretly from his mother sponsored the session. I played the role of a diligent student who simply do not give difficult sciences, and pretended to be an exemplary son, grateful to my parents for their care, for the chance to be in life. It was not easy, but it yielded results. His father gave the guy a car and promised an apartment for successful graduation from university. Mother threw money on the card for expenses, and Christopher Guy slowly returned to the old life. Only did it more carefully now. Parents had nothing against their sons' trips to the dacha, to classmates, or 2-day student hikes. They did not know that Christopher communicates not with these nerds, with whom he was always unbearably bored. He found his old friends. Or rather, they found him when they realized that he was back in the money. Entertainment was back in his life again. Growing up, Christopher was being more careful. He didn't want to arouse the suspicion of his mother and father, and he managed it up to a certain point. By that time, the guy had already graduated from university. He lived in his own apartment, given to him by his father, drove a luxury car, and as expected, worked as director of one of his father's firms. True, all the work was done by the deputy. A smart and responsible guy, James. His father trusted him like himself, asked him to tell Christopher what and how the company is organized. James at first tried to bring information to his new young chief, but then waved his hand and continued to run the branch on his own. Christopher was fine with that, and James was fine with it too. A few merry years flew by. Christopher liked his new life away from his parents. It was easier to hide habits, and now there was more money, the director's salary allowed to luxuriate. Christopher's girls became prettier, entertainment sophisticated, booze more expensive and refined. The guy enjoyed the new status and changes in his life. Everything was working out just fine. You just have to be careful not to show up in front of your parents drunk, not to come to work after partying. And then the guy meets her, Emily, and he's gone. Fell in love like a boy. She didn't bother him with attention, didn't threaten him with responsibility. It was Emily who offered the guy an open relationship. Why do we need these stupid restrictions? The girl once said, and if you or I like someone else, why should we hold back? Life is one, we should live it to the fullest, take advantage of the chance. The guy agreed with her 100%. He thought she was the wisest person he knew. Emily did not hide that she was attracted to him, including his money. She liked to drive around the city in a beautiful car and dine in restaurants. But according to the girl herself, much more she loved in Christopher his inner freedom. Not everyone has that. There are probably only a few people like us. We're not limited by stereotypes. It seemed to Christopher that the golden couple would last forever. But his mother had a new condition. Unlike Emily, Christopher was still not completely free. He had to adjust to his parents and their idea of an ideal son. Otherwise, he would have lost his financial support and would have gone back to work as a courier. Apparently, Christina was beginning to suspect something. Perhaps there were rumors at work that the boss likes a fun life and does not devote much time to business. Anyway, one day the mother invited Christopher to a serious conversation. The son prepared himself. In order to disguise the dark circles under his eyes, the consequences of a sleepless night, and he even had to use Emily foundation. He must look fresh and trim. His mother invited him into the living room. The table was already set there. His mother had made pilaf, which Christopher had once adored, but now he couldn't stand that greasy home-cooked meal. I heard that you're back to your old ways. Mother's eyes were filled with worry. I'm not telling my father yet, and I don't want to worry him. He's got enough problems as it is. You're seen in dubious company. Are you drinking again? Are you drinking again? No, really? Christopher assured me with a sincere smile. I don't know who's telling you all this, but they're lying. The pilaf is amazing, by the way. Just a taste from my childhood. Christopher, how hard did it take us to get you back to normal? Men can barely contain their irritation. Normal life? That gray, boring reality, which he, according to the wishes of his parents, existed for several years, was not a normal life for him. And even now he had to lurk. Although he is already over 25 years old, and he is the director of the company. It is good that now he has Emily, money, clubs, and friends. Only in this atmosphere Christopher feels alive and real. "It's okay, Mom." Christopher stroked her hand. "What are you worried about?" "You should get married," Christina said confidently. "It's about time you settled down. Apartment, car, job, you have everything you need for family life. Children will be born, there will be a purpose in life. For their sake, you will be ready to roll mountains." Christopher looked at his mother dumbfounded. Wow, what did she think of? And how did she come up with such a thing? What marriage? What children? There will be kids, will not pull in the club. This is such happiness. It's a whole new world. My father and I are already dreaming of grandchildren. It's always like this, me and my father, and his opinion never mattered to anyone. And the most frustrating thing is, you really have to get married. Parents had leverage over their wayward son. Very effective leverage, a faucet to shut off the money pipe. "Mom, I don't feel ready, Anne." "You won't feel ready. It's all your boyfriend's fault and your party life. It's time to settle down. You're all grown up now. If you don't, your father will find out about your outings at work. You think I don't know?" Christopher hated his mother at that moment. Can't you get behind your grown-up son and let him live the life he wants? It was as if Christina had read his mind. Of course we can leave things as they are. You'll have your own life, we'll have ours. But just what are you without your father's support? Rude but fair. Of course, without his father's patronage, Christopher will immediately lose his job. He won't be able to pay his rent. He'll sell his car. And then it's back to the dreary, moneyless existence. Been there, done that. He doesn't have the luxury of being who he really is, especially now he has Emily. She likes presents, parties, nice cars. I guess I'll have to go back to accepting my parents' terms. You're right, Mom. You're always right. It really is time for me to start my own family. That's great. Mom was happy. I knew you'd get it right. I have a few girls in mind. They are the daughters of my acquaintances. And no, Mom stopped the enthusiastic parent, Christopher. Let me at least make this choice myself, because it's quite something like the old-fashioned turns out. Parents also find a bride for their son. I cannot. Well, all right. Mother agreed easily. Of course, look for a bride yourself. Just don't forget to introduce us before the wedding. Christopher exhaled. At least here he managed to defend his opinion. If he married the daughter of his parents' acquaintances, they would know about his son's hobbies and lifestyle. No, he'll find a modest, quiet girl who can keep quiet. The candidacy of Emily, Christopher immediately dismissed. This is not a bride that would suit father and mother. She would never pretend to be a good girl in front of them, and in general, a stamp in the passport would break all the romance, their free and bright relationship. No, he'd have another wife to cover for him, and Emily would be his mistress. That's even more interesting. What ancestors you have. Emily shook her head. How, under such total control, did you grow up to be a free person? It's a mystery. Probably despite my parents. And the idea of marriage isn't bad. Find yourself some asylum, you won't have any trouble. A decent, modest girl who'll look at her husband's mouth. Parents will calm down, they'll relax their control. It'll be easier with your wife than with them. Much easier. Christopher smiled. Next to Emily saw their future happy and cloudless. The guy now faced a new problem. Where to look for a wife? Colleagues were out of the question at once. All of them communicated with James, and the latter, in turn, was on a short note with Benjamin. Then there would be too much information about Christopher's personal life. It wouldn't do any good. Club girls and Emily's friends were no good either. They wouldn't suit his parents. Christopher even registered on a dating site to find a suitable candidate. He specified marriage as the purpose of dating. This made his profile popular, but none of the ladies who responded did not suit Christopher. Mostly they were women older than him, with little attractive appearance. To live with one of them, even realizing that this is just a performance, the man could not. One day he noticed her, a pretty girl named Adriana. She worked in the same building as Christopher. Slender, sweet, with a soft, short stare, very pleasant and apparently single. Christopher had been watching her for a while and had never seen anyone greet her in the evening after work. At first, Christopher made eye contact with the girl. They would look each other over when they happened to meet on the porch overlooking the backyard. The girl was so sweet. At first, everything suited him. His parents became more favorable to him. His father willingly gave him money if he just mentioned it. For the family is not a pity. Benjamin smiled complacently. Now you're a family man, you have many times more expenses. At home he had a wife quiet, modest, gentle, devoted. Now the apartment was always shining clean, and the kitchen was filled with the dizzying aromas of home-cooked food. Adriana turned out to be an excellent hostess. It was a pleasure to return to this cozy nest. After another party, Adriana thought that her husband was late at work or traveling on business. How easy was it to fool this gullible simpleton? Christopher and Emily sometimes laughed to tears at the devoted wife, patiently waiting for her husband at the kitchen window. Life had settled into its routine. Christopher adapted to the new circumstances. Everything suited him perfectly. A couple of years after the wedding, both Adriana and Christina suddenly became concerned that the young people still do not get a baby. Christopher was overjoyed by this circumstance. Well, he did not see himself in the role of a caring father. A child is not just a cute picture from the internet. Sleepless nights will begin, children's diseases. With a baby can forget about peace and quiet. But the mother still took Adriana to some doctors she knew. They found some minor health problems in her spouse and prescribed medication. After a while, Adriana told her husband the news that they would soon be 3. The man gave what he thought was a masterly portrayal of joy. And then Lisa was born, a screaming, restless little girl. And it was even worse than Christopher had imagined. First of all, Adriana had completely stopped looking after herself. Christopher had not felt strongly about her before, but to see a tired and tortured woman with disheveled hair and a sagging belly after childbirth was beyond his strength. Secondly, all the parents' attention was now focused on the newborn and her mother. Father and mother made frequent visits to them. Adriana was pleased with their help, but Christopher, the presence of relatives, strained. They had become too close to his wife. Now Benjamin more and more often transferred money not to his son, but directly to his daughter-in-law. And new responsibilities. Before the birth of their daughter, Adriana had never bothered Christopher. Now she kept saying that he should take part in the life of the child, because it is supposedly very important for the baby to feel the support and attention of the father. The mother fully shared the opinion of the daughter-in-law. Now Christopher had to play not only the role of an exemplary son and husband, but also pretend to be a caring daddy. The man walked around the yard with a stroller and himself dreamed of being in the apartment which he rented for Emily. The parents' calculation did not come true. The mother kept saying that when Christopher had a child, he would find some new meaning in life. It did not happen. The man's daughter was nothing but annoyance. Lisa was a cute and funny little girl after all, and she looked just like him, Christopher. This life was weighing on the man. He wanted to get a divorce to be more free and happier. Adriana pissed him off more and more every day. He barely restrained himself not to be rude to her. But if Christopher leaves his family, He will not see the money and support of his father. And without him, he's nothing. Benjamin's right about that. He's not going anywhere. She annoys me. Christopher complained to Emily. He told his wife that he went on another business trip, and he came to his mistress for 3 days to rest his body. Emily suggested that Adriana be presented as an unhealthy woman who could not be trusted with a child. Then no one would accuse Christopher of taking his daughter and leaving a wife who was a danger to him and the baby. Will Adriana be put in a clinic, or will it be some kind of home treatment? Either way, Christopher will get rid of the annoying spouse and won't have to part with all the financial perks from his parents. That's great, of course. Christopher agreed. But what am I going to do with Lisa alone? Do you know how much Adriana takes care of her? I can't do that. You don't have to. Your parents will take care of her. Christina loves her granddaughter. She'll give you a career and she'll devote herself to the girl. You're probably right. That's probably what will happen. But how can I imagine Adriana being insane? She's shallow and naive for her age, but she's not stupid, is she? You're beginning to ask the right questions. Emily said with a smile of a boa constrictor. Her eyes shone like 2 bright stars, incredibly beautiful, not like the simpleton Adriana. I have a few ideas. It's very simple. Christopher was amazed at Emily's imagination. He'd known her for so many years, but he'd never realized how imaginative she was. A woman like that is better to have as a friend than as an enemy. And she certainly shouldn't be crossed. They began to act with harmless manipulations. When the wife fell asleep, Christopher moved her alarm clock an hour earlier or later. And in the morning, Adriana could not understand how it happened. She remembered exactly that the day before she had set the clock for a different time. Then the requests. Christopher didn't do it every day. Otherwise, it would look too suspicious. But periodically, he asked Adriana to cook 1 dish for dinner, and in the evening, he demanded another. And he would assure her that it was this other dish that he had been talking about in the morning. Christopher discreetly swapped things wife and child, hid Adriana keys and documents, called from her phone to unknown numbers, posted on the page wife strange photos and pictures on her behalf. And once, before the family went for a walk, he turned on the gas burner under a pot of stewed vegetables. Then he came back for his supposedly forgotten cell phone and prevented a fire. The scene was spectacular. The burnt pot, the apartment full of smoke, the bitter odor of burning, which took a long time. The man did as Emily suggested. He recorded on a dictaphone the cheerful, ringing laughter of his mistress, and several times turned it on Adriana. Emily was right. The sounds really frightened her spouse. She became pale and even more anxious. She lost her appetite and slept. Adriana, now restless, jumped up from every rustle. And when Christopher looked through his browser history, he saw that his wife was looking at the websites of doctors in their city. So the ice had broken. Adriana has made up her mind after all. She's choosing a specialist. That's good. The plan is working. There's not much left to do. The next morning, when Christopher left for work, Adriana called Wendy and asked her to come to visit her. Her sister gladly agreed, and by 12 o'clock she was already there. Adriana felt great joy and relief at the sight of her family member. "You are growing." Adriana smiled, pointing with her eyes at her sister's enlarged belly. She was due in a month. Wendy was moving slowly now and a little wobbly. Of course. The guest smilingly stroked her belly and turned to the little man inside it. Soon you will see your mother and aunt." The sisters went into the living room and made themselves cozy in the armchairs. On the table there was a fragrant pie with chicken and potatoes, and cups of tea were smoking. At first the women took a bite. chatting about the most common everyday topics, cold weather, approaching winter. And then Adriana made up her mind. "We need to have a serious talk," she said. Her sister immediately tensed up, realizing that it was about something really important and troubling. Tell me everything. You know I'm always on your side." And Adriana began to tell her story. Her story, put into words, sounded like the plot of a thriller. Wendy's face grew more and more anxious as Adriana described her symptoms. But when she told about the overheard telephone conversation, Christopher with the mysterious interlocutor, the sister exhaled with relief and even smiled. "It all makes sense," she summarized. "At first, I was afraid that something was really wrong with you, and that something is hardly treatable. Maybe it is?" Adriana took a sip from the cup. The tea was getting cold. "I'm thinking about that conversation at night. What if I dreamed it too, or even dreamed it? What if I'm going crazy?" "No," Wendy said, "sure. You have a clear mind, coherent speech, and weirdness only happens when your husband is home. He has a mistress who, for some reason, they want to officially declare you insane. I don't know why they would do that. If you just divorced and lived with your mom, it would have been easier. I can't believe that Christopher, that he could do this to me. Why, I always saw some falsity in him, and I even gently tried to tell you about it, but you wouldn't listen, remember? You were blinded by love then. It was like that, yes." Adriana admitted. "How do I know exactly what's going on? Is Christopher trying to make me look crazy, or am I really not healthy?" "That's easy." Wendy shrugged. "Record his requests, for example. Ask him what he wants for dinner and turn the recorder on, and then when he comes back, check it out. Better yet, put cameras in several rooms at home and see what he does while you're away. You'll know the worst symptom of all. If that laughter is only in your head, you won't hear it on the tape. I'm scared." Adriana was honest, and I'm scared of both situations. To find out that I am really sick, and to find out that my husband is such a scoundrel and traitor. I personally understood what it is and without the camera. In a confident tone, said the sister. "But we need proof. And then we'll figure out what to do about it." Adriana did as Wendy advised. The sister had supplied her with the cameras herself. She bought them to keep an eye on the baby that was about to be born. The woman had installed cameras in the bedroom, living room, and kitchen. Now, finally, she would find out the truth. Either way, her life would never be the same again. The change was frightening, but there was no other way. If she's sick, she needs to get treatment. If her husband is a traitor and a cynic, she must run away from him. That night, Christopher returned late. Adriana was already lying in bed when she heard the key turning in the lock, probably came from his mistress. And in the morning, the first thing the woman saw when she went to make herself some coffee was the terrible mess in the kitchen. There were broken plates on the floor, scraps of paper lying everywhere, and a pile of potato peelings on the windowsill, which, Adriana remembered, had been in the trash. She had thrown them in there herself. The woman couldn't help but sigh in surprise at the sound of Christopher coming into the kitchen. "What is it?" asked the man, amazed, looking at the strange picture. This is what? Is it you again?" "No," Adriana answered confidently. Now she really wanted to see the security camera footage, and that would clear everything up. But who? The man looked anxiously into his wife's eyes. "I got home late last night. Everything was fine. You must have been out of sorts again last night. I slept peacefully all night," Adriana said. "Baby, there's something wrong with you lately. There's too much weirdness. Why don't we go to the doctor together? I'll walk you if you're scared, but you have to see a specialist. Please." Adriana silently started cleaning. Christopher began to get ready for work, and then the same laughter came again, muffled, merry, gushing. Now it seemed mocking to Adriana. The woman lifted her head, listened, and the sound died as suddenly as it had begun. "Did you hear that?" she asked her husband, knowing full well his answer. "What?" He was surprised. "Nothing." Adriana sighed and continued cleaning. As soon as the door closed behind her husband, the woman immediately rushed to the camera, pulled out a flash drive, inserted it into the laptop, pressed the view button. An image of their kitchen appeared on the screen, a view from above. It was quiet and peaceful at first. Adriana put the video on fast forward, and lo and behold, a human figure appeared in the frame. The woman turned on the normal mode and took a closer look. It was Christopher. Of course it was Christopher. The numbers on the face of the wall clock glowed, 4:30 a.m. The man walked over to the dishwasher cabinet, pulled several plates out of it, wrapped them in several layers of towel to muffle the sound, and tapped them heartily with a rolling pin. Then he removed the shards and carefully arranged them on the floor. Christopher didn't stop there. He shook the garbage out of the bucket, right onto the floor, and then picked out the potato peelings and placed them on the windowsill. The man looked around the kitchen with a fastidious eye, then nodded to himself. Apparently, he was pleased with the result. Perfectly imitated the actions of a deranged woman. Well done. Adriana fast-forwarded again. The window brightened, and she appeared in the kitchen. The woman paused the funny movie. She needed to breathe. Turns out she had been sitting there all this time, catching her breath. Having come to her senses, Adriana continued watching. The woman clearly heard the morning conversation with her husband. The record kept every word. Christopher behaved like a real actor. Now Adriana marveled at the surprised look on her husband's face. What a talent to waste. He should be on stage. The woman waited for the main moment. Will there be a nasty laugh, or is it a figment of her sick imagination? Yes, and Adriana heard the laughter that had recently become her nightmare. The camera recorded everything, and how Christopher discreetly turned on the tape recorder in his pocket, and how he was surprised when Adriana asked him if he could hear the sounds. The woman turned off the video. There was nothing else of interest there anyway. She leaned back in her chair and exhaled in relief. Yes, Christopher had turned out to be a bastard, but more importantly, she didn't have to fear for her mental health. That couldn't have been more gratifying. However, new questions immediately came to mind. What to do now? What to expect from Christopher? Why did he have to present her as a freak? Why not just leave her for a new lover? Since he cared for her so much, unable to fight her emotions on her own, Adriana dialed her sister's number. She immediately took a cab, and in half an hour, she was at Adriana and Christopher's apartment. Wow. Wendy stretched after watching the tape. Well, now everything is clear. Keep the cameras on, so we have more evidence. Okay, but what's the next step? And then go to court, of course. He and his mistress are committing a crime for which they should be punished. That's all. Well, I don't know. And Adriana shook her head doubtfully. I just want to get away from him. Where to? Wendy asked. To her parents' studio apartment, where her father and mother had recently moved her elderly grandmother from the village? No. You and Lisa, both of you, have the right to live in much better conditions. By law, by the way. As a lawyer you can't help, but know that. This is so unpleasant. And it'll be even worse when your hubby realizes you're aware of his actions. Get ready. This probably won't end in a day. Too bad you don't have any strong allies. I wish I could help you." "What can I? Just moral support. I do have allies." Adriana suddenly had an epiphany. Christopher's parents. I don't know why, but they're always on my side. They're supportive. They give me gifts. They adore Lisa. It's really weird. Usually parents are always on the side of the kids. The in-laws probably know something about their son. You should talk to them. Call, set up an appointment, and make sure you show them the video. Maybe Christopher's parents will shed some light on this story, and we will understand why he behaved this way, and not just demand that you divorce as a normal person would do in his place. And Adriana immediately called Christina and asked her to come over. She agreed without question. Wendy, Adriana asked her to stay. I felt more comfortable with my sister. Of course I'll stay. There's no way I'm leaving you in this situation. Christina, as usual, showed up with gifts for Adriana and Lisa. She also brought a beautiful cake from an expensive pastry shop. You girls look so much alike. The woman splashed her hands. I can't get used to it. When we were kids, we used it a lot. Wendy smiled, especially at school. Adriana, you look tired and worried, don't you? The mother-in-law remarked, giving her daughter-in-law a glance. Is something wrong? Is that why you called me? Yes, something's wrong. And to understand what's going on, I need your help. The woman turned on the morning video to her mother-in-law and then told the whole story in order. Christina listened silently, caught every word, did not interrupt. Only sometimes a heavy sigh escaped from her chest. So nothing is over. Sadly, summarized her mother-in-law when Adriana finished her story. I had hoped that it was over, that he had really gotten his act together and changed. Is there something I don't know? Adriana clarified. It turns out you are. Christopher, it's our fault that he's like this. My husband and I built the business, gave it our full attention. In the meantime, Christopher was on his own. He got involved with a bad company and stopped studying, and this is the result. Then we caught on, tried to fix it. Tutors, the best doctors, strict supervision. We thought we'd done it. He stopped using and didn't see those shady friends anymore, only I always suspected Christopher was faking it. Just chasing the bad thoughts away, convincing myself that everything was fine. Wow! Wendy sighed. And I would never have thought your son had such problems. He does, apparently. I guess life has taught him to be a master of pretense. We threatened to take away Christopher's money and inheritance if he went back to his old ways. Without his father, without his money and his connections, Christopher can't do anything. It's sad to admit, but it's true. So he tries his best, playing the role of a model family man and perfect son. But Christopher has gone too far this time. I still don't get it. Adriana shook her head. If he's such a party animal and a pro-lifer, then why did he marry me? Why would a man like that need marriage and all that responsibility? My bad, Christina confessed. I thought that if my son got married, he would settle down. I also hoped that having a child with him would work a miracle. It would give Christopher an incentive to be better, more reliable, more decent, and change his worldview. But obviously that didn't happen. And yet, Wendy pitched forward, so gripped was she by the whole story. And yet why such an elaborate scheme? Well, he'd had enough of his wife and child. Wouldn't it be easier to just get a divorce and go back to his partying? I've got it all figured out, suddenly Adriana said. Christina and Benjamin set a strict condition for their son, either a normal family life or they deprive him of financial assistance. Am I right? You're right, the mother-in-law confirmed, lowering her eyes. Only now I realize it was our mistake. We put a lot of pressure on our son, out of good intentions, of course, but everyone suffered as a result. Christopher knew that all our assets were in Lisa's name. And we also threatened that if he hurt you, we would sign over a lot of things to you and leave him with nothing. That's it. The puzzle is complete. Wendy clapped her hands together. Now it makes sense. So Christopher wanted to make Adriana look crazy so that he could become the sole guardian of your daughter, the heir to your entire fortune, and in doing so, appeared to you as a victim of circumstance. His wife went crazy, poor guy, and now he's a single father suffering for the loss of his beloved. What about Adriana? She'd be institutionalized, deprived of contact with her daughter, and no one would trust a word she said. How awful. Yes, the plan is monstrous. Christina agreed, and especially hard to realize that its initiator, my son. There is also his mistress. Adriana reminded me glumly. My intuition tells me that she is the main manipulator, and Christopher, there are a lot of good things about him, and your plan partially worked. He works very hard, he stays late a lot, he travels a lot, he has a lot of good in him. Christina and Wendy looked at Adriana with a look of pity on their faces. Didn't you understand anything? The sister was surprised. How naive you are. Christopher and his mistress had it easy with you. There were no business trips. Christina shook her head. Christopher decides nothing at all in the company. Only James always takes care of everything. He goes on business trips if necessary. Christopher used to cover his job so that he could go out to bars and have fun with his friends and his mistress. But I still couldn't believe it. I thought there was a lot of good in Christopher. Adriana clung to her last hope of proving that her marriage wasn't all lies and illusion. Yeah, it doesn't matter. The mother-in-law waved her hand. Now let's decide what to do next. Christopher stood at the door of his parents' apartment. His mother had asked him to come over after work. Strange, of course, but interesting too. Maybe she wants to give him a special anniversary present. Something global, a new apartment, a car, a large sum of money. She thinks he's the perfect son now. He's working hard, raising a daughter. What's not to like? Oh, you look great. Christopher complimented his mother when she opened the door. Light makeup, well-groomed hair, stylish pantsuit. Mom, are we having company? Yes, nodded Christina, letting her son into the house. Come into the living room. Adriana? Wendy? Surprised, Christopher entered the room. You're a father. Why are you here? You're supposed to be in a meeting, aren't you? There are more important things than work, replied Benjamin. It's a pity I realized it too late. Christopher began to suspect something. Everyone was looking at him strangely, as if they knew about his and Emily's plan. But it's impossible, simply impossible. What is the occasion for which we are gathered here? Christopher tried to seem calm and natural. He sat down at the table, opened a bottle of soda, filled a glass. My anniversary is like only a week away. We all know, Christopher. Adriana couldn't take it anymore. You deliberately drove me crazy. Planned and methodical. And we have proof. What? The man couldn't believe his ears. Mom, Dad, what is she saying? Christopher, I saw it with my own eyes. I always knew you were a scoundrel, but I didn't expect this. Benjamin entered the conversation. Did you put the cameras? Christopher asked angrily, glancing at Adriana. What a clever, and pretended to be a simple girl. But you are far away from her. Wendy stood up for her sister. It's all your fault. shouted Christopher, looking at his parents. Christina shrank from his words, and Benjamin calmly looked into his son's eyes. You left me alone when I needed your support so much. You were only interested in business, and then you realized you started to control me. You completely deprived me of my freedom, and you still pressurize me. We won't do it again, son. Benjamin said quietly. We won't push you anymore. You're right. Now you are completely free, and you will make your own way in this life. You'll start earning your own bread. It's about time you did. What do you mean? Christopher asked anxiously, looking at his father. A small studio apartment and an SUV, so be it, keep it, but do not count on the rest for more. From now on, you're not on your own, flying free. And you don't work at my construction firm anymore. James is in charge there. I don't need employees like you. Try your luck elsewhere. All our assets are in Lisa's name, you know that. Christina continued. Your family apartment belongs to Adriana now. She has to raise her daughter somewhere. So we've already packed your stuff. You just need to hire a cab to move it all to your small apartment on the outskirts of the city. By the way, it's our anniversary present to you. Remember when we bought it a year ago? It's a generous gift. I don't think everyone gets such a head start in life. Use it wisely. You have no right. Christopher went into some kind of weird squeal. Wrong. My mother shook her head. It wasn't easy for her to say such things to her son, but she understood. You can't do otherwise. You can thank your parents for not having a case on you. Wendy added, I wanted to report you to the police, but they talked me out of it, said they'd deal with you themselves. Congratulations, son, said Benjamin. From this day on, you're free to fly. It's what you've dreamed of. Now you don't have to hide, live with your mistress, go to bars, have fun with your friends. You don't have to pretend anymore. Christopher walked out of McDonald's on a gray November evening. After the warmth of the room, it was unpleasant to be outside again. The wind was blowing, and a prickly snow flurry was falling from the sky. The man pulled the hood of his uniform cloak deeper over his head and adjusted the straps of the box behind his back. It's Friday, there's a lot of orders, but they'll pay well. He could buy more expensive booze and a decent appetizer and spend a nice evening in front of the TV. After his father fired Christopher from the company, things went badly for the boy. Money on the accounts quickly ran out. To stay afloat, had to sell the SUV. Good thing he didn't have to think about a place to live. His parents had generously left him one of their apartments, the smallest, but still. Emily couldn't stand that kind of life. She liked entertainment, adventure, fun, parties. Christopher had no more money for any of that. Of course, a beautiful and confident woman quickly found a replacement suitor for the loser. It hurt. It really hurt. After all, Christopher was willing to do anything for her. The man truly loved Emily. She was the reason he was in this situation. And her? So she was only attracted to his money after all. How could he not have realized that before? Now Christopher had to return to a long-forgotten profession. Where else could he go? Education is excellent. Work experience, indicated in the labor book, also impressive. But recruiters, from the very first minutes of the interview, realized that before them absolutely incompetent employee, and time after time refused him. So now Christopher rode around the city on a bicycle, with a huge box over his shoulders. He pulled his hood up, not enough for his former colleagues or acquaintances to see him. One day he was delivering pizza for a holiday party at a children's center. He was surprised to find his daughter among the children. Lisa looked like a princess in a lush pink dress and with an elegant crown on her head. Christopher involuntarily admired the little girl, even smiled. and suddenly the man slammed his palm on his forehead. How could he forget that today was his daughter's birthday, and he even felt a little ashamed. And then Christopher noticed Adriana. Beautiful, slim, spectacular, and very happy. She was lightly hugged around the waist by a young man. Already got herself a suitor? That was fast. It's only been 8 months since the breakup. Lisa must think of this man as her father. Christopher hurriedly slipped the pizza to the receptionist and hurriedly left the center before his ex-wife noticed him. The man pedaled with difficulty, the wheels of his bicycle sticking in the mud and snow. He still had a lot of work to do, and time was running out.